It's time for the North Idaho Prepcast on IdahoSports.com.
That's right. Welcome in another edition of the North Idaho Prepcast on IdahoSports.com, where we break down everything in Districts 1 and 2, week in, week out in the state of Idaho. My name is Brandon Baney, and joining us on the North Idaho Prepcast today is a new addition to the IdahoSports.com roster this year, Christian Weaner. Christian, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Brandon. I'm excited to be here.
Oh, yeah, we're definitely excited to have you on board. Christian has been writing a weekly feature for us, the Weekend Preview. You can catch that every Friday morning on IdahoSports.com. He previews the biggest football, soccer, volleyball matchups coming up over the weekend and does a tremendous job. What'd you write? Over 2,000 words last week, Christian?
I think it was over 3,000 last week with all the 8-man games and the Rocky Mountain Rumble. It was a very long article. So I don't know if anyone read all the way through, but hopefully they can at least check out their team's preview and everything. So
yeah. You've been knocking it out of the park for us. You're going to do some broadcasting for us this season as well, because you live in North Idaho. You're up in Bonners Ferry, which is about as far north as it gets in Idaho, right?
Yeah, seriously. I know the podcast intro, it says like Grangeville to Bonners Ferry, and yeah, we're all the way at the top up here. So I'm excited. Just moved here a little bit ago, so I'm kind of learning things as I go, but I'm excited to be covering high school sports here.
Yeah, give us a quick little bio about yourself. You're like me. You're an Idaho transplant, right?
Yeah, so I have my Penn State hat on here. That's where I grew up in Pennsylvania, central Pennsylvania, and went to high school there. I played baseball, basketball, and golf in high school, so did 3 sports. And then for college, I went down to Virginia to Liberty University. That's where I graduated from, and I actually work for Liberty still now. I work remotely in their marketing department, but when I was a student, I studied journalism. So I wrote for the school newspaper, and I was a sports director at a radio station there and covered high school sports and Liberty athletics as well. So I've covered a lot of sports. It's what I'm passionate about and love doing. And then moved up here. My wife's family's from Bonners Ferry. They've lived here for 7 years. And so we moved up here, and so I just kind of reached out to see if there's any opportunities. And turns out there's a lot of stuff to do here. So it's really cool everything that IdahoSports.com does covering high school sports.
Definitely. We are so excited to have somebody with your background and expertise. Like people like you don't just fall into our laps every day. So we've been it's been a good two-way relationship thus far, for sure. So you're perfectly suited to be a guest on this show because, well, you live in North Idaho and you're experiencing what's going on up there day by day. Again, as a reminder for people, I live in Pocatello down in East Idaho, but I kind of keep tabs on everything from afar, but that's why I bring in somebody that lives in North Idaho that can actually tell me what's going on and straighten me out. And so let's dive right into it. There was a lot of football action, as you said. You wrote over 3,000 words for the weekend preview last week. But let's start with the Idaho 8-Man Classic this past Saturday at Middleton, because there were 3 games featuring 3 teams from North Idaho. The North Idaho schools go 2-1. Let's start with Kendrick. They're the defending 1A D2 state champions, making their season debut, playing Notice, a 1A D1 team, so it's a higher level, and they shut them out 36-0. Lather, rinse, repeat. Kendrick is going to be pretty good again this year.
Yeah, seriously. I mean, the Tigers, I know you and Ryan talked about this last week, but only lost 1 player from their state championship team last year. So, they have to be expected to be heavy favorites to repeat this year at the 1A D2 level for sure. And, that was a huge win over Notice, shutting them out to start the season. Definitely a strong way to start the year for Kendrick. And as we'll, I'm sure, talk about, they got a big matchup coming up this week as well with Oakley. So.
Yes, they do. That is another game that will be on IdahoSports.com. They're meeting in the middle. They're meeting in Cambridge, which is in kind of western Idaho. It's where the Tri-Valley Titans play. So it's a neutral site game. And yeah, Oakley and Kendrick. the two defending state champions in 8-man football, Oakley at the 1A D1 level, Kendrick at the 1A D2. In that 36-0 win over Notice, Ty Kep throws for 2 touchdowns, ran for a third, and the IdahoSports.com player of the game was Jagger Hewitt. He ran for a 14-yard touchdown and hauled in an 82-yard touchdown pass from Kep. And again, Notice is not like they were a quarterfinal team at the 1A D1 level last year, so it's not like they were playing a subpar opponent. This was a good team they were playing, and the fact that they still won 36-0 is just incredible. And so Kendrick off and running per usual. Let's talk about the other team that got a win, Clearwater Valley. The Rams had a tight game with Glenns Ferry, 20-12. Glenns Ferry was a team that struggled last year, and so fans might be thinking, boy, the Rams only beat the Pilots 20-12, but Clearwater Valley also was missing a key running back, and so they weren't in at full strength, and the fact that they were still able to come away with a tight win, I thought was really encouraging for Clearwater Valley.
Yeah, it was a great win for Clearwater Valley to start the year. I think you have to take into account too, for all these teams that played in the 8-man classic, they traveled all the way down over the games at Middleton High School, yes. I believe, down in southern Idaho. So, that's a long way to go, and then to long bus ride and everything, and then to get out and get a win to start the year is obviously a great way to start out the season. So another solid win for a North Idaho team there in the 8-man classic. Didn't go so well for the third North Idaho team though.
That's right. So for Clearwater Valley, they didn't have Tiago Pickering. He'll be a key player for the Rams this year. Anthony Carter played well. Bass Myers was the IdahoSports.com player of the game as well. And you just mentioned it, the third team from Idaho that went down, at the end of the day might be the best of the 3 that played, but they just so happened they had to play the defending 1A D1 champs from Oakley. And that was Prairie going down and getting shut out. I don't know that we can take too much away from this. I think Prairie is still going to be a really good team. They just ran into the best team in Idaho 1A D1 football right off the bat.
Yeah, no, running into a buzzsaw there with 2-time defending champion Oakley to start the year. Obviously the scoreboard does not look great there for Prairie, but I believe that they're got a first-year coach this year, so that obviously got some learning to do and everything to start the season, but I'm sure they'll bounce back and be super competitive in their league as well.
Yeah, definitely. Oakley won that game 56-0. New head coach T.T. Kane, new quarterback, sophomore Levi Hines as well. But Prairie will be right where they always are, in the mix for the White Pine League title. There was an actual White Pine Conference game in week 1, believe it or not. And it was a pretty big one. 2 teams that were ranked in the top 3 in the preseason coaches poll. Kamia taking on Lapwai. Now, Lapwai was voted as the preseason favorite by the coaches in the White Pine League. That was before they lost a couple of key players to Clarkston High School in Washington. They lost Sage Lone Bear, who was a top 10 defensive lineman in the state of Idaho. He left, as did Mason Brown, who was a tremendous wide receiver DB. They both want to play at the next level, and they want to get acclimated to 11-man football, which is what they play in college. So they transferred to Clarkston. So Lapwai lost a couple of guys, found themselves in a tight battle with Kamia, and the Cubs come through with what I thought was a pretty significant win, as Kamia gets the 1-score victory by a final of 34-28.
Yeah, no, it was a great contest between Kamia and Lapwai, and obviously, like you said, a great win for the Cubs to start the year. They definitely went with the ground and pound in that game. They only threw 3 passes the entire game, ran for 199 yards, and just kind of grinded out that big win over Lapwai. I think Lapwai definitely has some talent. I know their new quarterback this year is Terrell Ellenwood Jones. He had a really good game, 424 total yards and 4 touchdowns in his first start at quarterback this season for Lapwai there. So definitely not too shabby there to start the year. And I'm sure, again, Lapwai will be competitive in the 1A D1 White Pine as well. But it was a good win for Kamia to start the year. And they got also a great matchup coming up this week against Raft River, the runner-up from last year in the state.
Yeah, so this is how it was all supposed to happen with these three teams: Kamia, Lapwai, Raft River. Lapwai and Raft River were supposed to play each other at the Idaho 8-Man Classic. That was supposed to be the fourth matchup, and Lapwai backed out, and they said, what I heard, and this was from the Raft River side, was that Lapwai dropped out because they were worried about low numbers. Now, I don't know if that meant low overall numbers or low numbers for the first game of the year, in terms of you have to have 10 practices to play in the first game. And maybe they had some kids that weren't going to reach that threshold. So I thought, okay, makes sense. But then Lapwai is playing Kamia in a conference game. And I go, that's more important than a non-conference game with Raft River. And now because Raft River lost that game with Lapwai, they had an opening. And they kind of called up Kamia and said, hey, we heard you moved your game with, so the game with Lapwai was supposed to be this Friday between Kamia and Lapwai. They moved it to last Friday. And so Raft River was able to call up Kamia and go, hey, can we come up and play you guys? And they were like, yeah, sure. So that's it was a very weird shuffling of the schedule, but I think we got some pretty good matchups out of the deal.
I was gonna say, yeah, interesting shuffle there, but definitely makes for some great early season matchups between some of the best teams in the 1A, D1 and D2 ranks there. So, we can't feel bad about that as North Idaho football fans. Getting some good games up here.
That's right. It's always a good time in the White Pine League. You'll learn, Christian, that a lot of these White Pine League games, like 34-28 is on the lower end. There's a lot of games that get into the 40s and 50s, and they just turn into big shootouts. It's kind of like the Big 12 in college football. It's a lot of good offenses.
Yeah, I was not super aware. 8-man football was not a thing in Pennsylvania or Virginia, really. So it's something I'm kind of learning. I know there's definitely obviously some intricacies compared to 11-man, but it definitely seems like an exciting game and got lots of great teams up here to keep track of. So I'm looking forward to learning more and maybe eventually get into a game. There's not as many teams quite as far up here as Bonners Ferry that do the 8-man, but maybe go down to Clark Fork or something and see a game.
Definitely. So Troy beat Deary 42-20. Genesee had a big shootout with Timberline, 52-44. Big matchups coming up. Logos got run out by Council, but Logos has like 35, 40 players on their team this year, which is just unheard of in 8-man football. It's got to be like every boy in the school. Logos is playing Clearwater Valley this week. That's going to be an interesting matchup, I think.
Yeah, no, I think that'll be a really good matchup. Like you said, obviously Logos dropped the opener there, and Clearwater Valley was able to get the win over Glens Ferry. But I think that'll be a good matchup. Clearwater Valley gets to come home after traveling down for the 8-man classic, like we said, and it should be an exciting matchup this week there in the 1A D1 White Pine.
Definitely. Let's talk about 8-man football. That's a little closer to where you are in Bonners Ferry, the North Star League. It's a new league this year at the 1A D2 level where Lakeside and Wallace dropped down to the D2 level. They'll be D1 in every other sport except football, joining Mullen, Clark Fork, and Kootenai. And right away we see some early dominance by Clark Fork, shutting out Lakeside 46-0, as well as Wallace defeating Kootenai 60-12. And then Mullen St. Regis is kind of the preseason favorite. They went over, they always play one game in Montana. So Christian, I don't know if you're aware of this since you're kind of new to the area, but Mullen is co-ops with a town in Montana called St. Regis. And so every day the kids from St. Regis get on the bus and drive over the pass into Idaho to practice. It's kind of a co-state co-op, and it's kind of a really cool deal. So every year they try to play one game in Montana. They went to Montana to play this first game against Superior, which is the defending 8-man champ over in Montana. So they lost 50-32, but that's actually not that bad of a loss for Mullen St. Regis.
Yeah, I think that they'll still be, obviously, like you said, very competitive. I think that'll be a really good race with Clark Fork. And, obviously the Clark Fork starting out the year great with the big shutout win last week. And then this week they're going to be at Mullen, like you said. So I think that'll be a really good matchup telling for the rest of the season as far as how the league standings should shake out. So, look forward to checking out that matchup this Friday night.
Definitely. And Lakeside, had a great running back last year, Vander Brown, entering his senior season. He is not playing football this year. We didn't know that until Friday night when we looked and saw that Vander Brown wasn't there. So that's obviously a significant loss for the Knights as they get shut out 46-0. They've got a new head coach that they're breaking in there as well. So that's kind of your 8-man wrap up. Let's get to the bigger schools now. Let's go to the Rocky Mountain Rumble, Christian. This is where I was at last week broadcasting for IdahoSports.com. And we saw 2 teams from up north make the long trip over. Sandpoint had the second longest journey of any team, and Lewiston had the longest journey of any team to get to Rexburg, where these games were held. Let's start with Lewiston. They played on Friday. They end up losing in pretty, decided fashion, 41-28 to Layton, Utah. Now, the thing with the Utah schools is they get a 3-week head start on Idaho. So for Layton, it was their 3rd game of the year already. For Lewiston, it was their debut. So it's really hard for the Idaho schools to beat the Utah schools at the Rocky Mountain Rumble. And Lewiston made a comeback late, but they were down pretty significantly most of the second half.
Yeah, no, I know. I mean, Lewiston lost a lot of talent from last year, from a team that made the playoffs in 5A last year. And so, obviously not the way you want to start the year, but obviously under head coach Matt Pankier, I believe it's pronounced.
Pancari.
Yep. Pancari. Okay, I apologize for.
No, you're good.
For that. Like I said, I'm learning, so I was going to apologize ahead of time for any mispronunciations. I'm definitely still learning. But yeah, though they fought back. I mean, like you said, they down 41-6 in the third quarter, fight all the way back and make it 41-28. You can't. You guys, say that's a good effort right there from the Bengals. And I know that they kind of have a 2 quarterback race right now with Chris Ricard and Drew Hottinger. And so I think that was kind of might have been part of it too, trying out a couple of different guys there at the quarterback position to see who's going to take over this season for them. So, they'll bounce back. I know they have a good game with Capital back home this week. So, it's not the way they wanted it to come out, but they fought hard against a really good team in Layton from Utah.
Definitely. I was on the call for the game, so I can tell you that with the Lewiston quarterbacks, it was probably like 75% of the time it was Drew Hottinger, and then 25% of the time it was Chris Ricard. And so I don't know how that will change going forward. But Lewiston's got good weapons. Jared Jelnick made a couple of nice grabs. James White obviously is a highly acclaimed tight end. In the running game, I'm telling you, Jackson Lathan was straight fire. Every time he touched the ball, he was ripping off, 6, 7, 8 yards. And I think he only touched the ball like 11 or 12 times. I wonder if that will be something moving forward, because every time he touched the ball, it was going for positive yardage and usually big yardage. So I'll be very curious to see, how they can incorporate Jackson Lathan into the game plan a little more moving forward as well.
Yeah, no, I think like I said, Lewiston's going to bounce back. I know the 5A IEL is pretty wide open this year, and so I think that with Coeur d'Alene just kind of having some a younger team this year and everything, so I think that the Lewiston could definitely make a run in their league there, and so I think that it'll be exciting to see some of that young talent and see what they do the rest of the year.
Definitely. Let's touch on the other team that was competing at the Rocky Mountain Rumble. They played on Saturday, the first game of the day, Sandpoint. And the Sandpoint coaches and fans and players will tell you, it was an ugly game. Sandpoint probably should have won. They lose to Alta, Utah, 16-15. The wind was blowing really bad on Saturday, and that led to a lot of interesting special teams, to say the least. But Sandpoint muffed a punt. Had a punt go like 10 yards. There was a blocked punt. There was a blocked Sandpoint came through and blocked a field goal try. There was turnovers. It was just kind of a really sloppy game for Sandpoint, and yet they still almost won.
Yeah, no, I know. I talked with Coach Ryan Knowles after this game for another article that I had written up, and I think that he was, still thought that it was a positive overall. I think he said he was happy with about 85% of what his team did, but that other 15%, like he said, is what killed him. Sandpoint took 8-0 and 15-7 leads in this game, so they were ahead for the majority of it. I know, like you said, the penalties, especially on the offensive side of the ball, really held the Bulldogs back in this game. And then also, 12 penalties, 132 yards. That's, quite a bit of penalty yardage to give up, especially just stalling out drives on the offense with holding penalties and things like that. Hurt Sandpoint, but like you said, still could have came out with this win. We're very close. Another thing to keep in mind, too, something I didn't realize, even with the Utah versus Idaho schools, is Alta High School is twice the enrollment of Sandpoint, more than twice the enrollment of Sandpoint. Even though Alta's a 5A and Sandpoint's a 4A, you would think, oh, that's not that big of a difference. But, I think Alta enrolls like over 2,000 students and Sandpoint's only like 900 something. And so, that's a pretty significant thing when it comes to football numbers and things like that. But I think Sandpoint has a really good team. They were, state runner up last year in 4A, and I think that they'll make a run for it this year too. So I'm really excited. I'll be calling some of their games, as that's like one of the closest teams up here to Bonners Ferry. So looking forward to following the Bulldogs this season.
Yeah, they'll make a deep run in the 4A playoffs again. They're versatile on offense. They a lot of times would start in a spread formation, and then they would, they'd run their spread stuff. But at other times, based on what the defense was doing, they would audible and all of a sudden go to a wing T and be able to run the rock between the tackles pretty effectively as well. The penalties, you're right, it was killer. Sandpoint scored a touchdown to take a 15 to 7 lead or whatever it was. Sandpoint had the lead. After the play was over, there was a personal foul on Carson Laybourne, all-state offensive lineman for Sandpoint. Just a little, extracurricular activity after the play. He got a 15-yard penalty. It was assessed on the kickoff. Sandpoint was kicking into the wind all the way back at their own 35-yard line. That set up Alta for what turned out to be the game-winning drive. It all stemmed from that penalty. They had great field position, and they were able to march the ball down the field and score what turned out to be the game-winning touchdown. So that was big. That penalty in particular really stood out to me. But yeah, Sandpoint, great opportunity to clean things up. Doesn't get any easier this week as they're going to play Coeur d'Alene, a Coeur d'Alene team that is 0-2. We're not used to seeing this. The Vikings are 0-2, but they have played the top two teams in the state in 5A football. Rigby 2 weeks ago, Rocky Mountain last Friday, they lose 30-7. Sandpoint beat Coeur d'Alene last year. The Vikings had a chance at the game-winning field goal, missed as time expired. So, Coeur d'Alene's going to be looking for revenge in the rematch with Sandpoint.
Oh, yeah. Coeur d'Alene has not had any favors done for them in their schedule so far this season, especially with, like I was saying earlier, with a young team. The Vikings, like you said, played the defending 5A champs Rigby at University of Montana, and then traveled all the way down to take on the number 1 ranked team this year, Rocky Mountain, down in southern Idaho last Friday. And so they'll be very happy to be back home. But like you said, not an easy matchup at all. It doesn't get any easier playing the defending 4A runner-ups there with Sandpoint coming to town, and especially two teams looking to get their first win this season. So, I'm sure both teams will be really hungry. Like you said, it was a really close matchup last year, and so I think that it'll probably be a good game again this year. I want to think that Sandpoint can pull it out, but I don't know. It'll be a good game, especially with Coeur d'Alene finally getting to host a game instead of being on the road. They've been definitely very battle tested already this year, so it should be a really exciting matchup though for North Idaho football fans.
Definitely. The other game we want to touch on is Lakeland beating Lake City for the first time in a long time, I think since the 90s. 4A Lakeland beat 5A Lake City. They win 30-21. Lakeland is 2-0, kind of quietly off to a good start under a new head coach there, and they have an interesting opponent this week. They're going to play Columbia on Thursday night. This is going to be a Thursday night game at Lakeland. Columbia will come up from District 3. That's a fellow 4A team that's also 1-0 to start the year. And for Lake City, they're going to play a team from Canada. They're going to play Raymond High School from Alberta, Canada. That's kind of an interesting matchup as well.
Yeah, I had to do some digging to find out information on Raymond High School in Alberta. They're making a drive too, like 6 hours down to play Lake City this week. But yeah, no, like you said, huge win for the Hawks last week over Lake City, 30-21. It was the first time since 1994, which was actually the very first year that Lake City High School opened up. Was the only year that Lakeland beat Lake City, and so that was obviously a huge win there. Especially 4A beating a 5A, that'll help Lakeland out a lot when it comes to playoff seeding down the line when we get to that point. But yeah, they played well as I know has been talked about. Thomas Calder and John Cornish, the two speedsters for Lakeland, led the way. Calder had 188 yards on the ground, and then Cornish had 124 yards on the ground and 47 yards receiving, 3 total touchdowns there for Lakeland. And so that, they've got a solid team. And like you said, another good matchup on it. It's a short week though. They're playing Thursday night against Columbia. So that'll, obviously a little different preparation there, moving the game up a day. But Lakeland looks to be a really solid contender with Sandpoint in the 4A IEL.
Yeah, it's going to be a fun one to watch. Post Falls also played a team from Utah, Skyline. They played a neutral site game in Middleton. It was a game that we covered on IdahoSports.com. Like all the Idaho schools that played Utah teams, no surprise, the Utah team's a little sharper, a little more ahead. So for Post Falls, I'm not too worried about an 0-1 start. They will host Timberline this week. Big 5A school from Boise will come up. That game will be live on IdahoSports.com. Live video coverage of Timberline and Post Falls this Friday night. That should be an interesting matchup for the Trojans. The last 4A team we have to mention is Moscow. They played Class 2A Kellogg. And Kellogg, this was another game on IdahoSports.com last Friday. We knew Kellogg was going to be good. But man, for a 2A to beat a 4A 50-12, Kellogg opened some eyes statewide.
Yeah, no, I saw in one of the write-ups, first year Moscow head coach, the quote just said, "They have some dogs," for the Kellogg Wildcats there. So, and obviously the two leading the way are the Luna brothers, Ripley and Colby. Ripley threw for 298 yards, had 50 yards on the ground as well, 5 total touchdowns. And yeah, they just absolutely dominated Moscow, which is really huge for Kellogg. Obviously, they're the 2A that just moved down from 3A. But for a 2A to beat a 4A, that's huge. I know Kellogg will obviously a great way to start their season, and that's going to be huge again for the Max Prep rankings and everything like that down the line. But Kellogg looks like a team to beat in the 2A ranks this year.
Yeah, they look pretty good. And Moscow is rebuilding a little bit. Rob Bayfus, first-year head coach, they're kind of resetting that program. They'll get better as the season goes along as well. The other 2A contests that we saw last week, you had Orofino dropping a contest to Marcine in a pretty, what I thought was a pretty even matchup as well. And then Grangeville loses to Coal Valley Christian, a team that's favored to win their conference 34-6. It's becoming more and more apparent that league, the Central Idaho League, is really Kellogg's to lose at this point. But who finishes second? I'm not sure I could tell you. I think St. Mary's will be good. Grangeville is always really good as well. And Priest River even dropping down from the 3A level could be in the mix. So that'll be an interesting league to keep an eye on as we move forward. The 3A schools last week, Bonners Ferry shut out Lincoln County, Montana. That's up in Eureka, which is even closer to Canada than you are. They won that game 14-0. So that was a nice start to the year for the Badgers. And then a game we had on IdahoSports.com, Timberlake hosted South Fremont. These two teams have played now. This was the third meeting between the teams in the last 2 years. They played. They've met in the playoffs a couple of times. They played in the regular season last year at South Fremont. So Timberlake got to host this year. They dropped a tight one, 18-14. For Timberlake, though, I think it was encouraging. I think they're going to be in the mix in the 3A race statewide.
Oh yeah, no, I think that was a good showing for Timberlake. Obviously, they came up just short. They actually outgained South Fremont in that game, though. I believe 234-171. So a good defensive showing. I know Timberlake actually allowed a a kickoff return touchdown to open the second half that kind of really hurt them, put them down in a whole 18-6. They battled back and made it 18-14. They had some chances at the end to get to get ahead, but just came up just short. But yeah, Timberlake will, obviously it's a 2-horse race. There's only 2 teams in the 3A this year, but I think Timberlake and Bonners Ferry will be a good race. But yeah, Timberlake obviously coming off the defending champions last year, I think that they'll be the team to beat in the 3A.
Definitely games to keep an eye on this week. You've got Timberlake playing Shadle Park High from Spokane. That should be an interesting one. Kellogg's going to play Newport High, another Washington school. Priest River will make their debut against Medical Lake, Washington, and St. Mary's will make their debut against Riverside, Washington. So this is kind of a week where Idaho will play Washington. So if you thought Idaho started late in relation to Utah, well, Washington starts even later than that. So it'll be interesting to see how these cross-state or interstate matchups shake out this week. But that's kind of what's on tap for football. And again, if you want to know which games up north we're broadcasting for North Idaho Game Night, just click on the Game Streams tab on the homepage at IdahoSports.com. Let's talk soccer. Girls soccer, Lake City, of course, the reigning 5A champs, played Coeur d'Alene for the first time this past week. And got a 1-0 win. I actually thought it was pretty encouraging for the Vikings to hang close. This was a game that could have gone either way.
Yeah, no, a really good showing from the Coeur d'Alene Vikings there. I think Coeur d'Alene dropped another one, a close 1-0 to Lewiston just the other day. So they started 2-0. They're 2-2 now, but 2 really close games against some of the better teams there in the 5A IEL. Lake City, though, has looked pretty dominant aside from that Coeur d'Alene game. And they have not lost since last year, the first game of the season against Sandpoint. So they after that game against Sandpoint, I think they had 1 draw and then won all the rest of their matches last season. And, out to a 4-0 start this year. So the Timberwolves look like the team to beat in 5A.
Yeah, they look solid. 4-0 overall, 3-0 in conference play. Coeur d'Alene's 2-2 in the league, and overall, Lewiston is 1-1 in conference play and overall as well. So yeah, Lake City still the favorite until somebody knocks them off for sure. And in 4A soccer, girls soccer, Sandpoint's 2-1 to start the year. They were the heavy favorites last year. Of course, they were upset by Moscow in the district championship game, and despite going undefeated in the regular season, didn't get to go to state, which was a big bummer for Sandpoint. I know they're motivated to atone for that this year. Volleyball also tipped off for the first time this past week. And, one of the great signature events in the state of Idaho always is the Judy Fong Memorial Tournament, hosted at Lewiston. Of course, Judy Fong and the Fong family, iconic in the Lewiston community, both Lewiston High and LC State, Lewis and Clark State College there in Lewiston. This was an interesting battle. Moscow and Coeur d'Alene met in the championship match, and they had actually played earlier in the week. So for the second year in a row, the Inland Empire League has kind of combined the 5A and 4A to where even though 5A Coeur d'Alene is playing 4A Moscow, it's going to count toward the league standing. So it's a little different. They played a league match middle of the week, and then they played again on Saturday in the championship, and both of the matches went 5 sets. It was pretty incredible stuff.
Yeah, no, it's there's very competitive volleyball up here, like in the 4A, 5A. IEL this season. A lot of really good teams. There's been a lot of close matches already just in the first couple weeks of the season. Here, like you said, Coeur d'Alene, they won 3-2 against Moscow on last Wednesday. In that game, Maddie Simons, who's been on fire to start the year, she set a school record with 33 kills in that one. And then in the Judy Fong Memorial Tournament, the Vikings were able to get the win. They went undefeated in the tournament, like you said, with that winning the last game over Moscow, and it went to the final set there, but they took home the win. And so that was a great way to start the year for Coeur d'Alene, but they're in good company there. I know there's a couple other undefeated teams, Lake City and Post Falls, that are both undefeated so far to start the year in volleyball as well.
Yeah, Post Falls went down to the Kuna Classic in Kuna and won that tournament. So nicely done for the Lady Trojans. And Post Falls kind of the preseason favorite up north in the IEL this year. And yeah, Maddie Simmons is so incredible. She's going to play college basketball at the University of Wyoming next year. She's already committed, and so you're going to get to see her a lot during basketball season as well. But yeah, turns out she's pretty talented in volleyball as well. So it's going to be a lot of fun to watch everybody duke it out up north all year long in the volleyball ranks. So Christian, your first North Idaho Prepcast. We made it to the end. You did great.
Oh yeah, thank you. I know I probably didn't give you quite all the one-liners like Ryan does, but I glad that I can help fill in here for a little bit, and yeah, thankful to again be covering high school sports up here, and hopefully I don't get too much pushback for some of my mispronunciations. I do apologize again, but thankful. Thank you for having me on.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I know one I'm already going to hear. Moscow.
Yes,
yes.
I've heard that one already. I've been working on that. Yeah, it's Moscow. Yeah, right.
Yeah, Moscow is in the news for different reasons lately, so for sure. Yeah, Christian, keep up the great work. Again, you can keep an eye out for the weekend preview written by Christian every single week on IdahoSports.com. That'll drop Friday morning / early afternoon, just ahead of all the big matchups going on for the weekend. And so Ryan Skaggs, our normal host, he's going to be out next week as well. Can I get a commitment from you to hop on again next week? I'm going to put you on the spot here.
Yeah, no, I'm looking forward to being back next week as well, and getting to fill in. So just anytime you need me, just make the call to the bullpen out here, and and I can hop in. So yeah, thanks for having me again.
Sounds good. All right, well, thanks for tuning in to another edition of the North Idaho Prepcast on IdahoSports.com. For Christian Weaner, I'm Brandon Baney. We'll see you next time. Thanks for watching /